Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the album wrap episode of season 9.5 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, joined as always on these episodes by my pal. He's the salt to my pepper, the Mike Campbell to my Tom Petty, the Mark Borch to my Walter Payton. It's the one and only John Paulsen. What do you think of that
Wow,
reference?
what a what an intro. I don't know if I can live up to that, but thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. This is definitely discussing greatest hits albums in general is definitely in my wheelhouse, and we are really in Tom Petty's wheelhouse here in this Full Moon Fever, Into the Great Wide Open, greatest hits, Wildflowers. This is his real big heyday, I think. So this is a good time to be talking.
Yeah, and so like I've had this little interstitial season between Into the Great Wide Open and Wildflowers, and just very quickly talking about. Obviously, we're going to talk about Mary Jane's Last Dance, but Peace in LA and Something in the Air. That we've got two tracks in there that I've covered as well. General thoughts on, well, maybe not Something in the Air, but general thoughts on Peace in LA. Like, how familiar are you with that song? How often do you listen to it? What do you think of it?
Uh, and I haven't, just in full disclosure, I haven't listened to your episodes about Peace in LA or Something in the Air. So I don't know where you stand on these, but Peace in LA, I think it came from a good place. Tom's got a good heart. He was trying to help.
Yeah.
It's not a song. You asked me to get some thoughts together on it, so I turned it on this morning. This is not very good. This is not. I mean, it also just brings up a really bad time in Southern California and just
Yeah.
bad memories. But I think what he was trying to do is to calm everybody down. I looked at the lyrics and it's basically saying what happened was wrong, but we shouldn't loot and steal from our own and
Yeah.
stop the violence. Don't play into their hand. But I mean, it just kind of comes off. I don't know. It's like, who's this guy to tell everybody what the black community or how to respond to this situation? This obviously rioting is not great, but I think he was like I said, trying to do the right thing. It's not a song that I would ever turn on other than to listen to it for
Yeah.
this podcast. I think it appeared on the playback box set.
Yes, with
Um,
the Peace Mix as well,
Peace
which
Mix, yeah.
doesn't really
Does it add
do.
the guy's voice talking
It's
about the
Howie,
stuff?
yeah. It's got
Okay.
Howie's that because Howie was out of town, and so
Ghost Howie.
they called him and um tried to record something, but it's like, well, the quality's just not there. So they had him say something, and then that's what I'm pretty sure that's
Okay.
what ended up on there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that it's not something that I would just completely ignore. I think it came at an important time in Southern California, but it's not one of my favorite Petty tracks by any means.
Well, and that's pretty much where I ended up. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's musically, you can tell it's rushed. Lyrically, he's just trying to get a message out there, and the sentiment's good, but the song itself, is it going to make any of my playlists? Absolutely not. But
Fair
yeah,
enough.
like you said though, we're in John Paulson territory firmly because we're basically really a greatest hits compilation is basically just a playlist, right?
Hmm.
First thing I wanted to quickly chat about then on the greatest hits is the way they sequenced it, which I thought was interesting because if you look at most artists' greatest hits, it's not usually done chronologically. Where with the Heartbreakers, with Tom and the Heartbreakers, they've just gone through Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers down through into the Great Wide Open in sequence, roughly. So what do you think of that? What's your impression of doing it that way?
I prefer to make my playlists chronologically, and
Hmm.
even I might go so far as to put the singles in order that they were released. So if I ever do listen to it in order, I kind of can get a feel for how the band was releasing their music and releasing their singles. And I prefer it because it also shows how a band's sound changes over time. I think there is, I just hit shuffle on my playlist a lot. So I do like the randomness too. And I think that you, what you did with your double LP sequencing, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is you're trying to sequence it in a way where the songs fit together, and it's also just a greatest hits compilation. I think you did a really good job with that. So there is pluses and minuses to both. I prefer just the anthology in order version, but I could see the benefits of the other side too.
Yeah, and I mean, when I listen to again, I don't really listen to greatest hits very often, just because as petty heads, we always say this. We know these songs inside out, upside down. We've heard most of them a million times. So they're not usually the ones I go to, so it's not necessarily my favorite. But when I listen to it, you do get that sense of growth. right? You definitely, because the sound from American Girl Breakdown through to into the Great Wide Open Learn to Fly is completely different. Songwriting's different, the production techniques are different, everything, when you get through Iovine era, then you get into don't so you can feel that journey. So I don't mind it. It's just I wasn't quite sure when I got them. I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do it that way, but so I do it two different ways. My CD is chronological, but my vinyl is sequenced as I wanted to do it. So let's talk about something in the air then real quick. That's the cover. It's what I always call it. It's the contractual obligation song because we've got to put this record out. We don't have two originals, but something in the air gets on the album in place of a few songs that I would argue pretty strongly, and I know that you would too, should have been included instead. So should we talk about some of those or talk about something in the air first?
Well, like I listened to it this morning, and I remember when this greatest hits disc came out and hearing it, and I thought it was a good song. And I don't know if I was immediately aware that it was a cover. I think maybe over time I realized that it was a Thunderclap Newman song. I
Yeah,
mean, that was a little bit before my time, and I think 1969. Wasn't listening to a lot of late 60s rock as I was coming up. Some, but not kind of more obscure act, not obscure, but less known acts that like Thunderclap Newman. But I think it's a nice cover. After I listened to it today, found myself singing it a little bit
yeah.
afterward, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a good track. I mean, it's obviously a really good song, and Tom always does, and the Heartbreakers always do really good covers. I think sonically it fits on the album. I don't think, I would want to put a cover typically on a greatest hits album in
Yeah.
general, especially when there's all these other songs that could have been included. But I wonder, did they say you have to release two new tracks to get people to buy this?
That's what I
Which,
suspect.
yeah. And if that's the case, did they have another? I mean, they had originals lying around all over the place.
Yeah.
Now, did they have time to go through digging to find You Come Through or Ways to Be Wicked or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and again, I mean that maybe that's where Tom thinks, well, I'm not going to put an original on there that I'm not really convinced about the quality of, so that's why you go to a cover, maybe, right? And I don't know, but someone was asking me on social media, like, I wonder where something in the air came from for Petty though, because Thunderclap Newman was this really. I mean, they're a one-album band. It was an assembled band to showcase the talents of the three guys by Pete Townsend of the Who, right? So when did you guys hear this? Like, how come that's the song that you've latched onto? It is an odd choice, right? Because you would think the Birds, you would think, Carl Perkins or one of the bands that Tom loved grew up, or Elvis or something. You wouldn't necessarily think this weird, obscure British band, but hey, that's the Heartbreakers. They just loved every stripe of music.
Yeah, they're all over the place with their covers for sure.
Okay, well, I mean, if we look at the songs that weren't included, I think the four biggest ones for me in terms of sort of things that were actually released, obviously, Jamming Me is the one we're going to probably talk about a little, probably the most, because that was, I think, the highest charting omission, I think, right? And it also means that there's nothing from Let Me Up, I've Had Enough on the album. But then you also think about Change of Heart, because there's only one song from Long After Dark, Woman in Love, there's only one song from Hard Promises. And then the other one that I was looking at, which really surprised me in retrospect, is Anything That's Rock and Roll isn't on there. Because that was the song that sort of got them moving a little bit in UK, and you would have thought that that would have been because it's a big song in the Petty canon, right? It's been played a ton live, but it doesn't get included on the record.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk a little bit about this album comparing it to some other greatest hits album maybe a little bit later. If we're diving into what was excluded,
Yeah,
there's quite a few. I mean, number one, I would say "Stop Dragging My Heart Around" uh, wasn't included on the original greatest hits release, and I think there's a strong case for it, which I know we might have some debate about that later. But if you're looking, I looked at it two different ways. If you look at it based on streams popularity, looking back at it from 2024, Love Is a Long Road is at 36 million streams. It had 13 points. So when I say points, it's the point system over at musicvf.com, which is a way for them to sort of give one number to all this chart performance, whether it did well in the US or in the UK or in the US rock chart, etc. So um, You're So Bad, 32 million. Love is the Long Road is at the top of this list, I think, because of the Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a popular song before that, but I think it really got a big boost here in the last couple months with that trailer coming out. Facing the Crowd. So the top three from a streaming standpoint are from Boom and Fever. And as I looked at all these, as I put together all my playlists and stuff, you can see that some albums do really, really well, and some of these songs are carried by the fact that they're on albums. So they get a boost for that. And so you get into A Woman in Love, 9.7 million, 26 points. Anything that's rock and roll, 8.4 million, 23 points. An Apartment Song, which wasn't a single, didn't have any points at all, but 8.1 million streams.
Yeah.
And then Rebels, 8 million with 25 points is another. And then after that, it's like I Feel a Whole Lot Better from a streaming standpoint, 7.2, Zombie Zoo, 7.2. And then Jam and Me, I wanted to go all the way down there to see Jam and Me at 7 million because the streams are really low for a song that charted so well. It had the highest chart performance at 73 points. So just based on chart performance, it was Jam and Me, Change of Heart, Facing the Crowd, Out in the Cold, Woman in Love, Rebels, Too Good to Be True, Anything That's Rock and Roll, Make It Better, Forget About Me, which is kind of it was a hit for him, but it only has 800,000 streams. King's Highway, You're So Bad, Runaway Trains, and Love Is a Long Road from a point standpoint.
Yeah.
So I originally was limiting myself to 74 minutes, but I started to do some research, and it does seem like there was 80-minute CDs available at that time. They were starting to come out in the late 80s, early 90s. So you said I have 80 minutes, which actually made things easier, but then they also made things tougher. So I ended up keeping the 17 must-haves, which I think we could agree on: Free Fall and I Won't Back Down, American Girl, Mary Jane's Last Dance, Learning to Fly, Refugee, Breakdown, Don't Do Me Like That, Into the Great Wide Open, Don't Come Around Here No More, Running Down a Dream, The Waiting, Here Comes My Girl, You Got Lucky, Listen to Her Heart, I Need to Know, and Even the Losers, which was not a single.
Yeah.
Amazingly. In addition to those 17, I have Stop Dragging My Heart Around because I think it was a number one hit. I don't know if contractually they could have borrowed it from Atlantic, I think was the parent company that released Belladonna.
Mm-hmm.
It did appear on a later version of this Greatest Hits. So they did think that it was kind of a petty track. And I think it would just add a whole lot of value to this. And then I would add Change of Heart, Jam and Me, Love Is a Long Road, and You're So Bad. And I think the one snub that's bothering me, there's a couple, there's a few, but the one that's kind of bothering me is Facing the Crowd.
Right.
Because it does well streaming numbers, and it does well if you look at the chart numbers. It's like third in both.
Yeah.
So it really should belong, but it is kind of, as you mentioned before, when we did the Full Moon Fever, it's a minor key, kind of a downer song. And my philosophy on this was you want to put this on at a party. You want to put this on at the bar. You don't want to have to do any DJing. You want to keep this thing up tempo and keep things rocking. You kind of want to stay away from the ballads unless it's something like Free Fallin'. So I went with Change of Heart, rocker, Jam and Me, rocker, Love's Long Road, rocker, and You're So Bad, which is a pretty good rocker as well. So those are the four that I used. And then, I think you got on me over DM about my being 1 minute over on my running time. I feel like, Tom and Mike were capable enough to figure out an edit here or there where they could have made it work. And I actually think that there were some releases that were coming out that were over 80 minutes on CD. The only issue is they were not playing in certain CD players.
Yeah.
I really went.
Yeah.
So there was a few older CD players that wouldn't play the 80-minute CDs, which I think is, looking back on this, it's just hilarious.
Well, kids these days, they don't know they're born. They don't know all these limitations, or if you had more than 100 tracks that it wouldn't display the CD information because it could only go up to 2 digits. All those things, kids these days don't know. But I was looking too that, so my list, the ones that I ended up putting on there were A Woman in Love, It's Not Me, Rebels, Runaway Trains. And we're going to get into that conversation about Runaway Trains versus Jam and Me, I'm sure. But I was also looking just at straight chart performance on the US rock chart. And I think when you get into that, like you said, Facing the Crowd hit number 5. You're So Bad hit number 5. Out in the Cold hit number 1 on the US rock chart. So that's a big omission, King's Highway hit number 4. Runaway Trains at number 6, Rebels at number 5. So there's these songs that are on the periphery. I think Woman in Love hit 5 as well. Change of Heart hit 10. So there are these songs that are getting lots of radio play that people definitely know that, like you said, you can definitely throw in there. Now, the other thing we've not sort of touched on is this isn't when, you know, from the point of view, I'm pretty sure we're coming at this from the same angle that we're not putting together our favorites. This is not our favorites from this era because that then you get into, well, that's going to change things drastically, right? Because
I
then
would
you're going to have a real problem.
I would say that these are they end up being my favorites based on the criteria of at least either being a huge streaming hit
Yeah.
for them now and very popular with the fans, or being a chart hit.
I'm belonging on a greatest hits. I think that's the
Yeah,
quality. That was a
yeah.
qualifier for me. Is like, should this be on Tom Petty's greatest hits? You know, and so let's get into this one straight away. Then, Jamming Me and Runaway Trains. The reason I picked Runaway Trains over Jamming Me is because I think gives a bit of a it gives a bit more breadth to Petty's sound. Where Jamming Me is a pretty straight up rocker, and we've got those on the album already. I thought Runaway Train shows that a little bit more of that synth. We've got a little bit of it on, you know, You Got Lucky, and a little bit on Don't Come Around Anymore. But I wanted Runaway Trains on there, and you know what? That song has really grown on me since I listened to it, since I did that episode. I listened to that song quite a lot. And you're laughing at me, John.
Well, I'm glad that you like it. I mean, this is part of why we're going through this exercise and we're discovering songs that we maybe didn't like as much then, and now we like it a lot. But I'm looking at Runaway Trains. I listened to it yesterday, thinking like, okay, what am I missing about this? And you know, Jan Hammer opening to me, it sounds extremely dated. Streams aren't there. It's okay in terms of streaming, but not even close to Jammin' Me. And I think it's probably the third best song, if that. Let's see here on that album. Jammin' Me, I think, is better. It'll All Work Out, I think, is better. I would say, yeah, maybe. Oh no, I like Ain't Love Strange better than Runaway Trains, but that's more of a minor album track. So for me, if you're gonna take one track from this album, you got to go with the hit. And Jammin' Me was number one on the rock chart, and you mentioned just that, but it was also pretty high on the U.S.
18.
Hot 100. Yeah,
Yeah.
18th on the U.S. 100. So I think, to me, if you and I were tasked in 1993 with putting this out, we would have a knockdown drag out about Jammin' Me versus Runaway Trains.
You were probably right. But I make no apologies for my choice. I make no apologies. Like I said, I just wanted to, and I was justifying it to myself, maybe just with the chart position, because it did get in the, you know, in the rock chart in the top 10.
It
But
did, but you just said that these are not you should not be your favorites. They should be the hits.
I think a greatest hit should also be representative, though.
It is. I mean, it's got Jam. It would have Jammin' Me on it.
How much do you really like Jamming Me? Do you rate that song like really highly in Tom's catalog?
I don't rate it really highly. I rate it highly than Runaway Trains. It's also grown on me throughout this process, and Spotify is feeding it to me a lot because when I was listening to Let Me Up, I Had Enough for the podcast.
Yeah.
The Spotify decided that I must really like this song, so it's going to play it more after my other Petty tracks or whatever play. I think it's a total rocker. Is it amongst his very best? No. But if you're going to pick a song from that album for greatest hits, I think it has to be Jammin' Me. But, we can disagree and still be friends and still do the podcast.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the beauty of the subjectivity of music, as I always say. So, well, let's talk then about Stop Dragging My Heart Around, because that one, I didn't even consider that one because it was never released on a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers record or a Tom Petty record, right? So that was my qualifier for that. And out of the two songs that came from that collab with Stevie, I'd always much rather pick Insider, but I didn't go with Insider or Southern Accents either, precisely for the reason that you went with, because Tom deliberately didn't want to release, he didn't release ballads as singles, and it would sort of interrupt the flow of this record if you start throwing something that low key on. So I didn't go with those, but I didn't go with Stop Dragging My Heart Around for that reason. So how do you justify putting it on when it was never released under the Heartbreakers label or name?
Because Tom Petty wrote it. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers played on it. Stevie credits Tom for a lot of the success, and it wouldn't have been the same song if some other guy had sung on it with her. So to me, like we're looking for his biggest hits of the era, and I think it's okay. And they obviously agree with me later on because they did include it on a later version of this. That if you're trying to like, my approach would be if I'm releasing this, I want to provide the best value to the fans, and if they can get "Stop Dragging My Heart Around" on this, if there's a way to, you know, lease that song, then that's just offering my fans the best possible value on this particular CD that I'm putting out.
So then for, when we get to making our greatest hits volume 2 at some point, are you going to argue for I Won't Back Down by Johnny Cash?
Well, that's a straight cover. Tom's
Wait,
on it.
Tom's on it, sings on it, the Heartbreakers
He's on
play
it, but
it.
it's not a duet.
So that's the line, is Tom's got to be one of the primary vocalists? Is that the...
Well, I think that's a big part of it. Sure, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
okay.
it's a duet with Stevie Nicks and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and the Heartbreakers are providing all the music. And you could say the same thing about "I Won't Back Down." I think, right? They played on that album with Johnny
The
Cash,
whole album, yeah.
the whole yeah. So you can make that case, but he's not. It's not a duet with Tommy or with Johnny Cash.
I'm of
So
course
that is the line.
I'm of course being facetious. I mean, I completely understand it, but I mean, the other thing is, I suppose with Stop Dragging My Heart Around, and I haven't covered that one yet, is, and I don't know, I mean, probably most of our listeners will know this, the Petty Heads will know this, but the track was essentially done. I mean, it wasn't really a duet. They gave Stevie the track and said, well, just put your lead vocal over top of it, right? And it works great because those two voices, as we know, just work perfectly together. But it is one of those things where you can't have Insider. It's too strong. I can't give this to you. But here's this song that we're not as sure about. Why don't you do that one? Which is, again, I mean, we talked about that on the Hard Promises episode. It's crazy that that song didn't make the cut because it really is a good song. I would also then just argue I'm not sure whether it's, I don't know if it stacks up with the other greatest hits as a song, just in terms of
Stop dragging my
quality.
heart around.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good song. I don't think it's at that very top Petty table,
Well,
man.
I would do this exercise and maybe put "Here Comes My Girl," "Even the Losers," "The Waiting," "You Got Lucky," "Change of Heart," and "Don't Come Around Here No More," and put "Stop Dragging My Heart Around" in the middle of that and see if it holds up. I think it'll do just fine.
Okay.
And I would say, you mentioned Insider, so that kind of brings up, and I think maybe we'll talk about this when we get into the anthology. I have a whole 2-disc, 3-disc, what if they had released
Yeah.
a 2-disc at this point or a 3-disc at this point. Maybe we could talk about that during the anthology discussion. But Insider would certainly be on that. It's more of a best of,
Yeah.
as opposed to calling it a greatest hit, right? Because it never was really released as a single. It didn't get a whole lot of radio airplay unless DJs are kind of going off off the reservation a bit.
Yeah.
But I think it definitely would have made a 2-disc uh, version of this.
Well, that's interesting. When you said that, then I hadn't thought about it that way because greatest hits has a very specific connotation, right? And then, like you said, that's where your argument about jamming me over runaway trains definitely carries a lot of weight. If it's a best of, then you get into, and that's where the anthology through the years. Tom even said that, right? They said, well, we're gonna pick some of our favorite songs as well as the songs that people expect on there. And I was looking through that. You know what's weird about that one is that it was released in 2000, but there's not a single song on that record from Wildflowers, which I found quite
Hmm.
odd. Yeah.
I think it was an MCA only.
Was it?
I think so, but I might be wrong. I think that's why it was only. I don't know why they went back and did a 2-disc out of that, but I think it was MCA only material.
You might be right. Yeah. Good catch.
So the other thing I would point out is, just looking at straight streams, "Love Is a Long Road," 13th highest streams amongst this MCA material. "You're So Bad," the 16th most.
Yeah.
Uh, just so where it sort of ranks in his top 20 or top 25. "Facing the Crowd," 19th. "A Woman Love," 22nd. "Anything That's Rock and Roll," 23rd most. So we're right on that cusp of popularity within the fans as well when it comes to these cuts that we're making.
Yeah, and I suppose that I mean I didn't give as much weight to streams just because that's
Right.
going to be weighted with modern day, modern era, that kind of stuff. But I was looking at, you look at even some of the stuff that, the songs that weren't released as singles that did hit the rock chart. Night Watchman hit 21. Between
Yeah.
Two Worlds at 35, I feel a whole lot better. Like Love is a Long Road at number 7. Um, but One Story Town at number 15. You know, there's a whole bunch in, like I said, Out in the Cold
Yeah.
might be the most glaring of those. And I didn't get that on my album, but that was, I think that one might have been the toughest cut for me, is not putting that one on there. Because first of all, I love that song. Again, it's another one that I really hadn't paid enough attention to until I did Into Great Wide Open, but it's a great track, man, and would fit with the party atmosphere of the album, right?
Yeah. And we talked about it during that album wrap. It's just criminally under streamed.
Yep.
1.9 million streams, 28 points though, because it got the number one on the rock chart. Yeah, that's definitely a tough cut. And I think that there is enough here for a two disc, a really good
Oh,
two disc set.
oh yeah.
If you add a lot of these cuts down to too good to be true, anything that's rock and roll, make it better, forget about me, King's Highway. And then you're also adding in stuff like Insider and Straight into Darkness and it'll all work out and tracks like that. You could
Yep.
really have a killer 40 track overview of his MCA career.
Well, that was the other very, very tough cut with Straight into Darkness, because I know we both love that song. I think it's the strongest song on Long After Dark. But just didn't do anything for some reason. So I didn't do that. I didn't do the two disc, but maybe let's run through, how did you split that? Did you do sort of a greatest hits and then the rest, or did you distribute it? Because I can't remember how you sequenced that.
Well, I have 9 different versions. No, I mean, I have a few different versions here, and I haven't decided, and that's sort of why I punted that to the
Right.
anthology discussion. But I think if we're getting to where we can have 44 songs, if you're thinking 22 or 21 per disc, and you have a two disc set, you can add some of these, and I won't go through the whole thing, but like you can add some of these like Surrender, like B-side, The Wild One Forever, um, you know, Insider, Straight into Darkness. You could
Yeah.
add tracks like my favorites from this era that were B-sides that came out that were pretty popular, like Keep a Little Soul was released as a single, which is really good. You can add Ways to Be Wicked, a lot of those tracks off of that Nobody's Children disc on playback. Waiting for Tonight was part of the Full Moon Fever sessions. I don't know why they didn't release that as part of this greatest hits package instead of Something in the Air, because that one was actually, I think, sort of ready to go. You Come Through as well. So you could add all these, and then you start to you have enough breathing room to get All or Nothing, Out in the Cold, Too Good to Be True on the disc as well from this last album prior to the greatest hits. So um, you I don't know. I think a lot of it is it's a single disc. We're charging 17, $18 for a single disc. We're charging $36 for a double
Yeah.
disc. We want to sell as many units as we can, so we're trying to keep it to one disc. And only later does, some of these 2, 3 disc sets come out, where you actually can get a full sense of his MCA material, or at least a full overview of his MCA material, while also adding enough songs to make it really appealing
Yeah.
to fans who want Surrender or who want, Waiting for Tonight, want like 6 or 7 new tracks that all, I think, hold up with a lot of these hits that are on there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I suppose then when you're talking about that, you've got 5 tracks from Full Moon Fever. So you've included 5. So obviously we talked about Love is a Long Road, but that made both of our lists. And then you put You're So Bad on as well, which of course, I mean, it's a petty fan favorite, hit number 5 on the rock chart. But your disc now is really loaded up with Full Moon Fever. So were you
Which is,
were you thinking about, you weren't thinking then about sort of distribution as much, but trying to be representative across the albums then?
yeah, I mean, I think Love is a Long Road is a better song than Out in the Cold, but you could make a case for Out in the Cold over Love is a Long Road for sure, if you want to be more representative to Into the Great Wide Open, or if you want to, I mean, I don't know that I would pick something from a different album other than maybe something like Out in the Cold.
Yeah.
Um,
You know what's funny is I was thinking about this too, and I almost did this, but I thought, you know what? It's a little bit, it might be a little bit asinine to do this, but I almost picked, and it was my favorites first. The only one I did it was Runaway Trains instead of Jamming Me, but I almost went with Out in the Cold instead of Into the Great Wide Open. Because, okay, Into the Great Wide Open is a great song, but it's not nearly my favorite from that record. It's kind of lower
right.
half on Into the Great Wide Open as an album because I think there's much stronger material, but you kind of have to put it on there, right? I mean, even
Yes, you
just for the
do
video
because
alone, it's got to be on there, you know?
yeah, if you're looking at this from a, and I think there's definitely a case where if we get into the nuts and bolts of this, and this is what's funny about this conversation is that it really doesn't matter anymore because playlists are
Yeah.
ubiquitous and you don't have to worry about this. But if we were sitting there in 1993 and one of the cases I might make or you might make to me is that, well, everybody has Full Moon Fever.
Yeah.
Like anybody who's really interested in Tom Petty is going to have that album. So they're going to have You're So Bad. They're going to have A Love Is a Long Road, which maybe is why those didn't make the album and only the major
Yeah.
hits made the album. And we could say, well, we could add something from earlier in the catalog, Woman in Love, certainly Change of Heart and Jam and Me, Rebels, anything that's rock and roll.
Yeah.
You could add one of these or two of these to make it more, spread out over his entire career, as opposed to loading up on what we think are the best songs and most popular songs.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Here's a question I didn't prep you for, so I'm going to throw this at you cold. If you could only, so, I think we're both agreed, and I think most Petty fans would agree that Something in the Air is the sort of, you know, weak track, if we want to say that, or is the weak link or whatever it might be, and maybe stops it from being a perfect greatest hits. If there was one song that you were going to replace Something in the Air with, and we were sticking to the 18 tracks, which one would you go with? Because I know which one it is for me, straight up, but it's not what I would necessarily consider, my favorite song, whatever it is, but there's one track that I think has to go on there instead of Something in the Air. Which one is it for you?
Well, I don't think you're gonna like my answer, but it would be Stop Dragging My Heart Around.
Okay. I like that answer. I like that answer.
Okay, I don't know if you would think that's a cop out. I think if you get out of that, if that's not like eligible, that makes it a really tough decision just to do a one for one replace, because you can make a case for 6 or 7 different songs. What would it be for you?
Change of Heart in a heartbeat, just because it's sort of it's probably the second best song on the album. It fits really well with the rest of the singles.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like a single, right? Like and it's one of those you think, why was that not bigger? And why is that not in that conversation? I think the only reason that's not in the conversation or doesn't get streamed or listened to as much maybe is because it didn't make the greatest hits. Really,
Yeah. I think that's part of it. When I heard it, I don't remember if I had heard it on the radio prior to like going back and looking at his chart history,
Yeah.
and it seemed familiar, but I don't know if I didn't put it together with Petty or how much I heard it on the radio.
Right. When
Yeah, it's a great tune, and it kind of has the ELO feel to me.
Yeah.
With the crunchy guitar.
3 minutes 18. It's tight.
Yeah.
It's this perfect little
So you like that? You like that a lot more than Jam and Me?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh heck yeah, yeah. I think well, I mean, lyrically, it's a much better song because the lyrics in Jam and Me are sort of, they're thrown together by Bob and Tom, and they're not, I don't think they agonized over that lyric, right? It was very much that sort of let's get this done quickly. Part of they're coming off the tour, and they've got that work aesthetic about, well, let's just write quickly and record quickly and get this done. I don't think they spent a ton of time, right? And it was like the Tom quote about when he called Bob and said, "Hey, I've written these lyrics. What do you think?" Is yeah, whatever, do what you want, sort of thing. Bob was like, I don't care. Yeah, that's if you think that's good, do it.
I mean, I think from a greatest hits standpoint, the biggest snub was Jam and Me because it was #1 on the rock chart, 18th on Hot 100. It was his biggest hit that was left off, but I could see a case. I could certainly see a case for a preference of Change of Heart. I cannot see Runaway Trains.
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't put that on there. I wouldn't switch that out one for one, right? I wouldn't switch that over. And I'm kind of regretting picking Runaway Trains now because I think I've upset you. I've upset John's equilibrium.
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, I don't know. Like I listened to it to try to be it with an open mind, and I don't know how you made that decision. But hey, we all have. Music is subjective.
Right? One thing we were in agreement on though, when I was looking through, was that neither of us reduced the representation of any album apart from taking off Something in the Air, which I thought was interesting because neither of us, because I mean, I don't know where you would. Damn the Torpedoes at 4 might be slightly overrepresented. And then, like you said, if we're being really clinical about it, even The Losers not being a single and I don't think the rock chart actually even existed at that point. I don't know when that came into existence. I'm not too sure what era that was, but hang on, let me look. Because, well, no, Night Watchman hit the mainstream rock chart, so maybe right around 80, 81-ish it started. But even the Losers didn't chart, so I think that, if you're going to be really clinical and really merciless, you could say, should it be on a greatest hits if it wasn't a single, if it didn't get any airplay? I don't know.
I mean, it's a classic. It
Oh,
did get
yeah, for
airplay.
sure.
I don't, yeah, I mean, I'd heard that song before,
Right.
on the radio. I don't like, I think it, I don't know how they do I don't know how they do the singles all the time, and how they track
Yeah.
the chart performance, but even Losers was I don't think it was a hit because it was on the greatest hits. So there's nothing there that they included that I would remove. It's just
Yeah.
that we have extra space to add other than Something in the Air.
Well, thank God, right? Thank God we don't have to
Right.
start taking things off and be like, if you said to someone, you've got to get it down to 15, I would just throw my hands up and walk away because I don't think I could do it. Like, what would you take off?
Yeah. What do you cut? You don't.
It's just a murderer's row. I mean, I went back and looked, apart from Something in the Air, every song is a 10 that I'd rated every song a 10 apart from three, which were nines. And my nines were Into the Great Wide Open, You Got Lucky, and I Need to Know. And I Need to Know only because it's a good song, but it's a really short in and out. It's got one message. It's one dimensional, not in a bad way, but it's fairly one dimensional, that song, right? It's not like as interesting as some of the other stuff, but still, I mean, this powerful driving song. So they're all nines and tens. I don't know. I can't take anything off this record.
Yeah. I don't think we would. And just to talk about Mary Jane's Last Dance a little bit, uh, what a track to just add to your greatest hit. I pulled a quote. He was really against the idea of, this is from I watched the documentary Running Down a Dream, the part about the greatest hits. He's like, I was really against the idea of the greatest hits, but it was contractual. I was really against writing a song for it. How can it be a hit if it's a new song? And then he goes, so he took this track, which was part of the Full Moon Fever sessions. They did not have the chorus. Rick Rubin liked it and said, well, why don't you write a chorus for it? And they did. And it turns out to be Mary Jane's Last Dance. And I think, that song's success contributed a lot to the fact that this went 12 times platinum or
Yeah.
whatever it was. Because this is the one place where you could get it. If you're buying the single, it's $5. If you're buying this greatest hits, it's 15 to 17.
Yeah.
So why not get all these other hits on top of it? And just an incredible song to pull out of the archives and to dust off for a greatest hit, which actually became its greatest hits for him. And it's my wife's favorite song. So whenever he played this at concert, she would always light up, and he almost always played it
Yeah.
after it came out.
Well, 552 times. I think it's seventh or eighth most played song live or something like that. It's in that region, right? But I'd said on the episode, and we talked a little bit online on just on our regular socials about songs that are included on greatest hits albums that belong on greatest hits albums. And I heard from quite a lot of people and some really good songs. I don't think anything gets anywhere near Mary Jane's Last Dance in terms of, I don't think there's a top 10 song in any of those other artists' catalogs where I think Mary Jane, you could make a strong argument this is one of the best songs he wrote, right? And just that switch in the chorus is what makes the whole thing. He said, when they brought in and Hey Indiana Girl, Go Out and Find the World, and Mike Campbell said, we all hated it. And then he comes back with this new chorus and just totally transforms the song. And it's funny how that one change can work. But you can also hear, with that guitar riff, the opening, the feel of it, the groove of it, you can see why Rubin thought, yeah, you got to do something with this dude. There's gold here. This is, work this up.
Yeah, it ended up being the last track that Stan Lynch played on.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Last original, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, last original. So what a way to go out for him. He didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
I was watching that whole divorce on the documentary as well. It's just funny how I think Tom is very non-confrontational and let this sort of relationship wither a bit.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to have the tough conversations. And then he was also hearing Stan badmouth his music and not really wanting to play on it. And it's just sort of this long divorce.
Yeah.
As they start trying out other drummers for Wildflowers. So pretty crazy story there. And what a way to go out though for Stan Lynch if your last song you played on is Mary Jane's Last Dance.
Well, and crushed it because it's a great drum part. And I'd found out I didn't know this, but Rick Rubin said to Stan when he comes in, "Yeah, I only want to hear one fill." Stan Lynch is not going to just do one fill. He's going and he's not like playing all over it. It's quite a reserved track, but it's a great drum part and it sounds fantastic because Rick Rubin knows how to mic drums up. And before the days when he got into the loudness wars and everything's just brick walled, Rick Rubin used to be a very, very, very good producer, and I think he got a great take out of Stan on this. But Stan said, or Tom said, Stan played his part. We looked up, he wasn't there anymore, and we basically never saw him again. So it's one of those things, man. Bands fall out of love with each other.
For sure. I think he came back and played at a benefit at the Viper Room because Tom threatened to replace him for that show with Ringo because Stan apparently had moved to Florida
Yeah,
and was like, "Well, is there any money in this benefit show?" And he's like, "No, the band's doing the show and you need to be there." And he was mad. Tom was mad that Stan was acting like this. So he showed up and played, but I think that was their last
that was the
performance
last.
together.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the photo that I used for my compilation on Spotify. If you notice, that's the only photo that exists from that gig because it was no cameras allowed, and it was the opening of the Viper Room. So it was Johnny Depp had called around a few people, and the Heartbreakers went and did. We don't know exactly what the set list is because there's only sort of a fragment of it kicking around, but.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but
I
what a
didn't know
cool
that.
gig! What a cool gig that
Yeah.
would be to be at because that's such a small venue and to see the Heartbreakers at their prime. They're right at the peak of their powers to go and be in that little room with those guys. So cool.
So did we talked about mine, You're So Bad, Stop
Yep.
Dragging My Heart Around, and Jamming Me, I also added Love is a Long Road. You added Rebels,
Yeah.
Runaway Trains, A Woman in Love, and Love is a Long Road as well.
Yeah.
Right. And I asked, why'd you pick Runaway Trains over Jamming Me? So we got that covered. And I'm like, okay, so we discussed Stop Dragging Your Heart Around. So what are your thoughts about You're So Bad? Is it even close
Yeah. I
for
mean,
you, or was it close for you?
it's a great song. I think it's maybe I don't know. I'm going to say something now, and it's going to come out. I'm going to regret this as soon as I've said it. I don't think it's a serious song, which songs don't have to be, of course. But it's this frivolous little bit of whimsy, which I love Petty doing, but that doesn't scream single to me ever. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense? I don't know.
It does. It was a crowd favorite. I think fan
Yeah,
favorite as well. And I see if someone was going to pick apart my playlist, I could see that it's too heavy on Full Moon Fever, and that's an
yeah,
album that most people have. So I could see that, understand that argument. I think it does keep the party going. I think it's a fun one. And you mentioned like, oh well, Runaway Trains, that shows his musical breadth. I think, You're So Bad shows his sense of humor.
yeah, for sure.
You could make the same argument, but just a different
Yeah.
adjective there,
Hey, I've
in
never,
terms of
I've never, I've
what
never claimed
official.
to be consistent in my opinions or positions, John. It's the old Groucho Marx say, well, if you don't like my ethics, don't worry, I've got other ones.
Yeah, so I left mine with my biggest snubs list was Facing the Crowd, Out in the Cold, A Woman in Love, and Rebels. Like those are
Yeah,
painful not to have on, and that would be fixed with a 2 disc set. But none of those are screaming to me. I mean, Out in the
yeah.
Cold, I could argue. Woman in Love, I could argue. Rebels does not really fit with my party vibe I'm trying to go with. So I feel pretty comfortable with it. It is tough. I mean, whenever you constrain yourself with time and a band this good, you're going to have to make some tough cuts. I thank you for giving me the extra 2 tracks so that I could get Jamming Me on there for posterity in terms of its chart performance, and I could get Change of Heart on there as well.
Well, and one thing that we haven't really touched on is, like you said, we've only taken the cover off the greatest hits. We haven't removed anything. We haven't gone into that. Oh, that shouldn't be on a greatest hits album. We had a conversation about Even the Losers, but we both agree it's got to be on there because it's one of the most well-known songs in the catalog. And again, Damn the Torpedoes is overrepresented in quotes, and maybe Full Moon Fever on your disc, but it's because they were gigantic records,
Gigantic
and
songs, yeah.
just
Yeah.
huge songs played live, tons and tons and tons. I was looking through, you look at the average number of times a greatest hits song was played live is 435, and that's with the 21 or something in the air dragging it down a little bit, right? So these were the songs that people go to Tom Petty concerts to see. But
Yeah, you
so
put this on at a party or you put it in your 5 disc changer, you don't ever have to take it out.
no,
Remember the 5 disc, 6 disc
oh yeah,
changers or cartridges? I mean, kids these days, they just pull up their phone and have their playlist. They pull up some playlist that somebody else made and they hit play and they don't know what we went through. Now, I'll just say this on the greatest hits in general.
Mhm.
I'm so fascinated by these because these were huge in my life. Funds were limited. I mean, in terms of how much music I wanted to consume, and I had to try to get best value as I could. And so I was buying like a lot of different greatest hits because I was really getting into classic rock as I grew up in the 80s. I was going back to the 70s and the late 60s sometimes, listening to the Beatles and all these other bands and having to trying to get as many of my favorite songs for as little amount as money
Yeah.
really lend itself to greatest hits. And I always am fascinated by when they make mistakes or why are they doing this or why are they doing that. But, Petty's greatest hits, ubiquitous when I was in college in terms of, people having it. It's up there for me with like Bob Marley Legend, which went 15 times platinum. As far as an overview and how top to bottom quality of the
Yeah.
album. Um, the other ones that kind of jumped out to me, Madonna, the Immaculate Collection. I wasn't a huge Madonna fan, but I know like every girl I knew in college had that 11 times platinum. I did own it as well, I think. Uh, Queen's Greatest Hits, 9 times platinum in the United States.
Yeah.
Obviously went like 25 times platinum in the UK. That is a 17 track just masterpiece, but it also has room for more. If you were to release it on CD, you could add 14 minutes or so,
Yeah.
I think, of songs or more, 18 minutes, 20 minutes of songs. Like they could have added more to that. Um, the Cars 1985 had 13 tracks. There's a 2002 version that's better. It went 6 times platinum. So, and the last one I wanted to mention is another one that just jumped out to me thinking about it was Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Oh
They had
man,
a 20 track
I totally forgot about that one.
chronicle that went 12 times platinum, which is just jam packed with good song after good song or great song after great song. Obviously, the Beatles, Red and Blue compilations were amazing, but
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's 4 discs, and they even left off. So I mean, it's hard to compare anything to what the Beatles did. And the other one I wanted to mention was the Eagles' Greatest Hits 1 that went 38 times platinum. The light blue one, and then the second greatest hits went 11 times platinum. So even their second set almost did what Tom Petty's did. But again, those are very shorter discs. All these have room to add something once you get into the CD age, and these were huge for me. Just being able to buy these and getting an overview of a band, and then realizing whether or not I wanted to go back and get into their
Yeah.
album by album discography.
When I think, if we're talking about where does Petty's greatest hits stand in that pantheon, in that conversation, for me, the Eagles is a funny one because I loved the Eagles when I was a kid. And I still look back and I think, I can say, yeah, the quality of the songs was good and the production was great and the songwriting and the vocal, all the performances and everything else. But Eagles, I don't know if they're really still a, I mean, I know with our generation, people still buy tickets and everything else, but I don't think you hear Eagles on the radio maybe as much as you even hear Petty anymore. I think they're a bit more time locked into a certain era than Petty's. I think Petty's music is a bit more durable, and I think will be played still. And it's gonna be the hits. But I still think like you're gonna hear Free Fall in 50 years. Hotel California might be the only Eagles hit really that's gonna persevere. Where I think Petty's got a few more of those. So I don't know. So 38 times platinum. That I didn't know it was that big. That's insane. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
everybody had that 71 to
Yeah.
75. And
Yeah.
and I don't know when that came out where they started adding tracks because this one didn't. I mean, this one had 10 tracks and it was all from their albums. And I
Yeah.
think the second one was the same way. So I don't know when that happened. Like, oh, we need a new track for the greatest hits compilation. And then you get some, and that's the one criticism we have of this. Well, two, like they could have added more songs. So why didn't they
Yeah.
add a few more? And then why did they include Something in the Air? Now they probably were told they had to produce 2. So that's what they had. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they could have worked a little harder and, putting Waiting for Tonight on there or Digging Up You Come Through would have been a great addition if they could have gotten Lenny Kravitz to appear a couple years earlier to do his part.
Or Surrender. I mean, again, a song
Surrender,
that we both
which
like, and
did get, I think it did
yeah,
get added to their anthology
yeah,
release a few years later. So um, I would say that would be my one criticism is the inclusion of that cover. And then the
yeah,
other is, was it a conscious effort to limit the total number of songs, and why were you doing that?
Yeah.
Because it could be a record company exec saying, well, we want to give them this, but we don't want to give them too much to cannibalize your own back catalog. But I think that's, from a fan standpoint, that's kind of a double-edged sword, because if
Mhm.
you the more songs you can put on the greatest hits, the better chance somebody's going to hear something that they're going to turn into a huge Tom Petty fan and go back and want to listen to every album that they released over the course of whatever their career was at that point.
So what was the runtime? 65:44 is the runtime of the CD. So yeah, I mean, it's not like it's, even if you put it down to 75 or 74, I don't think that's overstaying its welcome because of the quality of the songs that you can add. So it'd be interesting if it would have been interesting to hear that conversation about, which ones we include and which ones are we not. And again, anything that's rock and roll was released under as a UK edition bonus track. So clearly that conversation was had. So I don't know why UK only, like, maybe again, like we said, where it was one of the songs that sort of, broke them more or less in the UK. So maybe that's part of it too, is the market, right? If we're releasing this predominantly in the US and this is predominantly a US band, these were the ones that were the big hits in the US. But like I said, then how do you justify not putting Jamming Me on there?
Right.
It's such a strange. It's the omissions are stranger than the inclusions on this, I think.
And I don't know, like, I think maybe you and I have talked about this more than they talked about it. I don't know. I don't know, like, if Tom doesn't want to do the greatest hits
Yeah,
compilation and doesn't want to write songs for it and is kind of doing this begrudgingly, like, how into the weeds is he on what's being included or what's
this
not
is
being
true.
included, or who's in charge,
Yeah,
of the track listing. Um, I find it fascinating. I would love to just watch an hour documentary about the making of the greatest hits, and like the inside conversations as to like what the decision makers would take into account.
yeah,
Because Jam and Me isn't up there with his all-time greatest hits in terms of like the quality of the song or how often it was played or whatever, but chart wise,
yeah,
it's absolutely a greatest hit of his, and it should have been included just from a chart performance standpoint.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I was, looking at comparable. I was looking at greatest hits too, and some of the ones that I'd written down, Fleetwood Mac's greatest hits. The
Oh
Green
yeah.
cover is phenomenal. Eurythmics, I think, is a really, really good. We got that Dave Stewart link there, but that's a fantastic greatest hits. Springsteen's I was looking at, and I was kind of surprised, obviously because there's parallels always drawn between Tom and Bruce, but that was released in '95. So it's kind of right around the same era. There's four new songs on Springsteen's greatest hits, which means there's only 14 of his hits to that point on that record. And I would argue of the four they added, only Secret Garden belongs on that record because the other ones, Murder Incorporated, Blood Brothers, This Hard Land, they're good songs, but to me, I don't. Can you hum any of those right now? Could you just off the top of your head?
No,
Where the rest of
no.
the, Atlantic City, Dancing in the Dark, Born in the USA, Glory Days, Human Touch, Born to Run, Thunder Road, all these are iconic songs. The ones they added is like, yeah, you can tell that these were not, you kind of had to work at these. So I don't think Springsteen's greatest hits stacks up.
Yeah, he
Um,
did. He did really. It was 76 minutes, so he
yep,
was like, there was a conversation there. Like, we need to give him something. The new song, yeah, new songs, four new songs. I remember Murder Incorporated.
yeah,
I don't remember Blood Brothers or This Hard Land.
yeah. But again, I mean, I
Um,
think if you look at the times or two, we've got 18 songs and it's 70 odd minutes, but Springsteen tends to write longer songs too, where
yeah,
Petty in his early years was really writing those nice, tight 3.5 minutes is probably the average song length, right? So
and this one,
makes a difference too.
the Springsteen one went 6 times platinum, and I think the Fleetwood Mac went 9 times platinum. Double checking that. 8 times platinum.
Yeah.
So just what a monster. I was just underlining that because what a monster hit for Petty.
Yeah.
I think the in terms of album sales, it was more than Into the Great Wide Open, Full Moon Fever, and Dan the Torpedoes
Yeah.
combined.
Yeah. Oh, it was by
So
far and away his biggest record by absolutely miles, right? I mean, which I mean, the same with Queen. Queen's greatest hits was far and away their biggest seller. I think Aerosmith Big Ones might be their biggest seller. So, greatest hits tend to be because they're more accessible to a wider audience. So that's no bad thing. I was looking to it. Dylan, Dylan's greatest hits is only 10 songs. Rolling Stones Hot Rocks, 64 to 71. It's a great record. It's padded out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the Beatles are the ones I go back to. The Blue Album, when you look at the songs on that, it's just insane. You think, and that's just one of their greatest hits. And there's what, 28 songs on it? Bananas.
Here's you mentioned Aerosmith because I every time somebody mentions big ones to me, I'm thinking back. Well, what about the Red album, the Red Greatest Hits, that first one?
Yep.
That one went 12 times platinum. The first one, the second one,
Wow.
big ones went 4 times platinum.
Oh, it only went
Just
4.
kind of, yeah,
Okay.
which is kind of crazy when you think about how big the big ones album was
Yeah.
in '94, but the 1980 release, which is a really good overview of their '70s stuff, basically
It's great.
went 12 times platinum.
Although again, I mean, it's got Remember Walking in the Sand on it, which I love, but it's a cover. I don't know. It's the
There you
strongest
go.
stuff, but it's got
It's
some of the
also got
great stuff on it.
come together, but that was kind of a
Come
hit for
Together's
them,
on there,
wasn't it?
yeah. Yeah,
I
but
think
that was
wasn't it?
also that was from yeah, it was from the movie, right? That was that Sergeant Pepper's that weird movie with the Bee Gees in it.
So for me, huge,
Yeah,
influential, got me like even more into it. Some of the older stuff, certainly some ways to improve it, but uh, glad he released it. I wish, I wish we knew more about the track listing as to why it. I honestly think that this conversation might have been longer than the one that they used to decide the track listing.
well, I mean, again, this is where that's why it's called show business and it ain't called show fun.
Yeah,
It is a business, and as you said, Tom wasn't really in favor of doing it, and it's also strange where you think he's in the middle of writing Wildflowers. He knows how seismic that album's going to be. You've got to have a sense of this is the best thing I've done so far potentially, right? So to have this greatest hits where you've not even done your career. Looks how old was he in? So he'd have been what, 43? So he's not done his career
right.
yet. So to do a greatest hits, and when you think about the songs after that belong on a Tom Petty greatest hits, I mean, dear God, there's no way you can do a single. How would you do that? Now that'll be an interesting one when we get to that. Once we've done the 16 albums, then we will force ourselves one exercise. If we would had to do a single disc greatest hits, how do we do it? Because that'll be torturous.
Now, is that sadism or what are we doing to ourselves? This is absolutely unnecessary pain we got to put ourselves through to try to knock his whole entire career down to one disc.
Oh my
That's
God.
insanity.
Yeah, maybe we should just leave it.
Masochism?
I don't think you
I
could.
don't know what's
I
what.
really don't think you could do it, right? I mean, I don't know because how am I going to
Yeah, I
leave
mean
off
you're
Room at the
cutting. Yeah,
Top?
you
How am I
could
going to
do
leave
it, but
off?
you're cutting even losers off. You're cutting. You might be cutting like "Here Comes My Girl." I mean, it's just you're asking for "Into the Great Wide Open's probably going to be gone.
Yeah,
You're asking for trouble. It's got to be a minimum of 2 discs, and even that's going to be tough.
yeah. I mean, I think getting it down to 2 discs from the post Great Wide Open is going to be, Although having said that, depending on what criteria
Right.
we use, right? Because again, if you go to chart performance and all those kinds of things, Mary Jane's Last Dance was the last hit he had, really.
Yeah,
In
big.
terms
Well,
of
he had some
big
off
one.
of Wildflowers, but
We
yeah,
don't know how it
he
feels, I
start.
guess, is yeah.
Yeah, he started to peter out a little bit with the chart performance, but I think that was what was important to him at that point. He did have a
Yep.
number one album later on. Hypnotic Eye, I think, was the number one
Yep.
album,
Yep.
and did have some hits here and there, but it wasn't like you're getting into your 40s and 50s and 60s. You're not exactly hot on the charts,
Yeah.
so to speak. So
When I think it comes, we talked a little bit about on the album wrap episode for To Go Out Open. It's that switch in his songwriting where now I think he is writing predominantly for himself. And he's trust that other people will listen to it because I've got this fan base who likes my music, but I'm not going to chase the chart hit anymore. And
right.
so I think that plays into that as well.
Well, you also mentioned like bands chasing the trends
Yeah.
in the late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. And I think there was a few tracks like Runaway Train, Runaway Trains that you could sound kind of dated.
Yeah.
I don't think that those worked out that great for him. Maybe other than You Got Lucky.
Yeah.
And so I think he just made a determination like I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm
Yeah.
just going to go back to the Heartbreakers sound as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
Because everybody, all the bands kind of got, in their own heads about what new electronic sounds we can make and how we can make things sound kind of weird in the studio. At the time,
Yeah.
it sounded futuristic, but now it sounds dated.
When they had Ben Montench there saying, "Yeah, I'm not playing that. Go screw yourselves. It might be new and it might be shiny. I'm not doing it." But here's my argument about run. Well, I'll make one last case for Runaway Trains, and it's is that I think that if you update the instrumentation on that, or sort of
Okay.
change and don't, I think the song itself is really good. I think the song is really strong. I think if you played that, it's one of those you could play acoustic solo, you could play it on piano, you could play it because the song, the lyrics are really good and the melody is really good and the structure of it's really good. Is the Jan Hammer intro, chewing the scenery? Like, yes, absolutely. But I also have a real, because I used to listen to Jean-Michel Jarre when I was younger. Like, I'm a keyboard kid, so it never bothered me as much. But I think in respect, if I'm taking one thing away from this conversation, is I think you're probably right that I shouldn't have put Runaway Trains on my greatest hits.
I would argue in all seriousness to reconsider that decision and to perhaps and also the funny thing is that for your CD version,
Hmm.
you have to remove a song
Yeah,
and you remove Rebels,
I did.
not Runaway Trains. It's amazing. No, you can absolutely love the song and it doesn't belong on the greatest hits.
Well,
That's
okay,
just
look.
my position on it.
Well, look here. I've done one already. We're going to make another football reference. I'm going to call an audible. And I'm changing my decision. I'm keeping Rebels on and I'm taking Runaway Trains off, which
On the
does mean,
CD
however,
version.
on the CD version, but it does
But
mean that I've got no representation now for Let Me Up, which I'm okay with. I can live with it.
yeah, I don't think you have to have a song from every
No,
album necessarily, unless it
I
really
think,
belongs.
and I think Rebels
But
is stronger than anything else off or anything that was released from Let Me Up.
you should probably take a hard look at your LP and see if Jam and Me would fit where
Yeah,
Runaway Trains is. If you're trying to make a greatest hits album,
it might. I'll put it under consideration. How about that?
that's fine. I'll live with that. Thank you.
Okay, well, is there anything else for us to talk about, or should we start wrapping things up? What do you think?
No, I think it's good. And I do, when we get into the anthology discussion, which will be a fun one too, we could talk about, I have a 3-disc
Yeah,
version, which I think is insanely good. But it is also, you know, predates the box set a bit, which is what they were trying to do with the box set with a 5-disc box set.
yeah.
So it's a lot of that's overlap, but I think it could have been affordable and would have been amazing for fans as well. So we could talk about that during that episode.
Well, I do want to just quickly run down a greatest hits that one of my listeners sent me. And it's
Okay.
a guy who has been a listener since pretty much day one. He's a big supporter of the podcast, Paul Roberts. So listen to this. He's gone rogue. Like he's gone completely off the
Okay.
reservation. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 songs from the original set. So he's taken out a bunch. So he's going American Girl Breakdown, Dog on the Run, live, but trimmed down to 4 minutes. So that's from the official live leg. Listen to a Heart Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, The Waiting, Even the Losers, Women in Love, Straight into Darkness, Southern Accents, Rebels, It'll All Work Out, song that we both love, Handle with Care. So he's kind of doing the
Okay.
Stop Dragging My Heart Around thing where he's dragging in
Yeah.
something from something else. And then he goes Run Down a Dream, Free Falling, Won't Back Down, Learning to Fly, Great Wide Open, Dark of the Sun, and then finishes up with Mary Jane's Last Dance, which again, it's a pretty good album, man. I
So
mean, it's that
what did he remove? That is the question
he
because your listing
removed. That's
goes.
a good question. I didn't actually write that down. So he didn't put on. Let's have a look.
So I'll just say
You Got
when
Lucky
I
isn't on there. You don't come around here no more isn't on there.
wow.
What else have we got that's not on there? I Need to Know, I think maybe isn't on there. And then something there, obviously. Is Here Comes My Girl in there? Yeah. Don't Do Me Like That. Don't Do Me Like That is the other one missing.
Oof,
Yeah.
that's tough. No offense. That's a rough. That'd be rough.
Yeah.
If I were buying it, I'd be looking at it like,
But 21 songs, I mean, when you read those 21 songs out, if that's a playlist that I'm going to listen to, it's a great 21 songs,
yeah, yeah. But if you're
And that's the thing with
ponying
Petty.
$18 and you want the greatest hits, then you probably want a little bit different
Well,
track listing on that.
Paulsen Bolton, they're a little bit Not too far from where I grew up, but they're a bit weird in Bolton. He's going to give
Is
me
this going
nothing.
to make the podcast?
Oh hell yeah, and he's going to give me all sorts of grief about that.
I will say like the biggest snubs for mine, Facing the Crowd Out in the Cold, Women in Love, Rebels, all would fit perfectly. And I do like that he did include the that's just segueing back to his is
Yeah,
that when I do best of lists for Petty, I do include Handle with Care, End of the Line,
yeah,
and sometimes even Last Night, because Last Night, which we might, I don't know if we're gonna ever talk about his songs on
oh
those
yeah,
albums, but like that Last Night could have been a Petty hit or at least a great Petty album track, but we've also got Roy Orbison and
yeah.
the whole thing going on there. So I include a lot of those on the playlist as well. So I appreciate the fact that he did include that. I think as you get later in his career, some of that stuff might start popping up on his anthologies. I'm not sure, or live versions or something of, or maybe it's just his concert versions
Yeah,
of the
they,
Handle with Care. He
they
started
did handle
playing
with
it.
care live, but they didn't do. He didn't do. I
He
mean,
never
I know he
released
did.
it.
No, and they did Tweeter as well. I think live, and I think maybe End of the Line. That might be it from the
Okay.
Wilburys. I'd have to go look at the set list. Yeah, let's bring it up. Let's see. Handle with care. End of the Line. Tweeter and the Monkey Man. And Poorhouse. Oh, they did Poorhouse once live, which great track. I love that track. In 2015 at the Troubadour in West Hollywood. Cool. Oh, that's just so
Troubadour
that must have just been like a little, only a 10-song set. So that might have been like a promo-y type
benefit
of,
or
or
yeah,
benefit or
something.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because yeah, they did. Oh, yeah. No, totally. So listen to this
The
set list.
smaller the room, the more wacky they'd get with their set list because they
Yeah.
know everybody that's there is just happy to be there.
Listen to the set list. Cabin Down Below. Little Red Rooster, Willie Dixon. I'm a Man, Bo Diddley. 13 Days, J.J. Cale. Dogs on the Run. Runaway, Del Shannon with Jeff Lynne, who was in attendance. The Poorhouse with Jeff Lynne. Roll Over Beethoven, Chuck Berry, of course, with Jeff Lynne, because that's Jeff
It's a
loves that song.
yellow hit, yeah.
Mary Jane's Last Dance and then Running Down a Dream. Yep.
Yeah, they finish strong. They always finish strong.
Always finish strong. All right, well, that's good then. I think we've yeah, I was listening to your playlist. I'm like, yeah, I can't any fault with it. Like, that's the really pick any 20 songs from this year, as long as you've got, like you said, those anchor points in, the ones that have to be on the Free Fallers and Running Down the Dreams and American Girls. You can really pad it out because there's so many good tracks from these first 9 records. So
I'd really have a problem with that. I mean, Don't Do Me Like That. It's one of my favorite
yeah,
songs and it was a big hit for them at that
yeah.
point. So it'd be a tough one to cut, but not to start nitpicking again. Don't Come Around Here No More. How can you not have Don't Come Around Here No More on a greatest hits package?
It's my daughter's least. We skip that song in the van because my daughter doesn't. My youngest daughter doesn't like that. She loves Petty, but she doesn't love that. And I think
Has she
it's
seen the video?
maybe she has, but I think it's maybe because my wife has played that to death. I think she's just
Okay.
overplayed it for her. So
Show her the live version from the
oh my God.
Into the Great Wide Open tour.
Yeah.
Whatever that one's called.
Yeah.
Forget the name of it,
God, what is that called? Take the Highway live. Yeah.
Take the Highway. Yeah. Show her that version.
Top 10 live performances of any song by anyone ever for me.
Well, I mean, he walks over to they're doing the intro and he walks over to the chest and pulls out the hat and everybody goes crazy.
Yeah.
And then obviously the song's amazing. And then he's got the whole breakdown where he's getting chased around the tree. It was insane. So yeah, it's a fantastic, that was just a good showmanship too.
Yeah. Which they didn't lean into. I think only on that tour, really, they went to those extremes, right? But
right.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll leave it there. And you know what? I'll put a note out. I'd love to hear other people's greatest hits because we're always, the rationale behind why we choose things over others is that's our personal preference. There is some logic in there. John's very clinical about, looking at chart performances. He's way better than me at that stuff, looking at streams, all that kind of stuff. But we'd love to hear your greatest hits and what you would change, chop out, put in, take out, within time constraints. You can't have 25 songs unless you're picking all the 2-minute ones, I guess. But until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to start talking about Wildflowers. But I've got a special pre-season episode that I'm doing this time, which is something I haven't done yet. But I think with the scale of that album, I've got to give you a little bit of a prep. Bye-bye.